Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to be starting again the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch class. We are up to chapter 23, the laws of reading of the Torah and getting an Aliyah to the Torah. We actually started the beginning of this simon, but it's been so long, so I'm going to start again from the beginning. Here goes. If anybody would like to turn on the video, that will definitely enhance the atmosphere. Okay, Sif 1. When the Sefer Torah is taken from the ark, it is to be carried to the bima, where the reading takes place. It is to be carried toward the north, that is to the right of the carrier. When it is returned, it is carried toward the south. So we open up the Sefer Torah. He doesn't go into this here, but the widespread custom is that before, when the Aron HaKodesh is open, even before we take out the Sefer Torah, we say Berich Shemei, which is a passage of the Zohar. There is some discussion about when it is to be said, only on Shabbos, only on Shabbos Mincha, but in practice, the widespread custom, and certainly the Chabad custom, is that we say it every time whenever there's a Torah reading and we open the ark, we say Berich Shemei. And then the Chazan takes the Sefer Torah toward the bima, walking on the north side of the bima, which is to the right of him carrying it, and then he returns also. Now he's facing the other direction, again to his right, which is now on the south side of the bima. Now this is different than when a person gets called to an aliyah. When a person gets called to an aliyah, so just a second. When a person gets called to an aliyah, we'll see soon that you're supposed to usually go the shorter way and come back the longer way. But here, when the Chazan is bringing the Torah to the bima, so he goes on the north and returns on the south. Now, the Sefer Torah should be held in the right hand. So whenever you hold the Sefer Torah, you're holding it in your right hand, and it's sort of resting on your right shoulder. It is a mitzvah for everyone before whom the Sefer Torah passes to accompany it to the bima. So if you're standing in the path of the Sefer Torah walks past you, and then you follow behind the Sefer Torah all the way until the bima. So there's no need to get out of your place to go and greet the Sefer Torah and follow it to the bima, but if it passes you, then it is customary to do so. And I'm not sure if everybody has this minhag, but certainly I've seen it be done. And yeah. Okay, number 2. The person being called up to the Torah, the Ola. Ola means the one going up. The word which we use, Aliyah, means going up or being called up. So the Ola to the Torah should wear a talis with tzitzis. Okay, so this is, again, there's different customs. So it's exactly, every community has their different customs, whether the person who gets an Aliyah should be wearing a talis or not. And basically, if it's if you're in a community where that's a custom, then obviously that's what you should do. He should take the shortest route and return to his seat via the longest route. And here we add that if both routes are of equal distance, so if he's sitting in a place which is exactly to the center of the bima, and it makes no difference if he goes, whichever way he goes, it's going to be the longest route, the equal. So then we say he should ascend to the right and descend by the other route. In other words, you go to your right towards the bima, and then when you leave, you go the other way around. What I have observed people do is that when both routes are the same, so that when he leaves the bima, people sort of make an extra loop all the way around. In other words, if you're sitting to the, I'm just trying to imagine this, right? You could have a short route and a long route, and then you could go out of your way to make the route longer to your place by making an extra circle around the bima. So he doesn't say to do that here. He says that if both routes are equal, then you go to the right on the right, which is well, it depends if you're coming from the front or the back. So you go on the right and come back on the left, the other way. Perhaps that's what people mean. They go around because they're going the other way. So they do that by going around. Okay, either way, I guess it's very sort of subjective to the layout of the room and where exactly you're sitting. It's customary to wait until the person after him has completed the last bracha, and then he descends between the readings. So person A gets called up, he finishes Aliyah, he steps to the side, and then he waits there on the side of the bima until the following Aliyah is concluded. And when the person after him finishes the bracha after his Aliyah, that's when the person from the person A is going to return to his spot. Okay. So, number 3, any questions so far? Number 3. So open up the Sefer Torah and look at the place to read. Now, there's many customs which we'll review in a moment, but the part that's sort of indispensable, that's necessary, is that before you make the bracha on the Torah, so you get called up to the Torah, before you start your bracha, you have to know, quote unquote, what you're making your bracha on. Just like when you eat something, you have to have the apple or the piece of food in front of you when you say the bracha. And the same with a mitzvah, yeah? Before you don't just, you have to have your tefillin in front of you, and even, yeah, when you make the bracha, etc. So the same is true with getting called to the Torah, that before you make the bracha before the Torah, you have to know which passage you're making your bracha on. So the first thing that's necessary before we get to any additional customs is that open the Sefer Torah and look at the place that is going to be read. Now, there are actually certain scenarios. I don't know if he's going to go through it here. There are certain scenarios. Yeah, it's going to go through it later on later in this chapter in Sif 18. He's going to go through certain scenarios where if for whatever reason he looked at the wrong place, he was shown the wrong place, then there are certain scenarios when he will have to repeat the bracha. So we'll get to that later. Now, in practice, I don't think he's going to mention that here, but in practice, it is the widespread minhag. Not everybody has this minhag, but it's certainly widespread, and it's definitely the Chabad minhag, that not only do you look at the place where you're going to start reading from the Torah, but you take either your talis or the gartel of the Sefer Torah or something like that, and you touch the spot in the Sefer Torah where you're going to start reading, and then you kiss it. That's an additional custom. Not only do you look at the place, you're also going to take something and kiss it. And furthermore, the Chabad custom is not just to touch the beginning of it, but also to touch the end of the place where you're going to finish your Aliyah. It's very important to point out, this is a common issue, is that people, when they take the talis with the gartel, they rub the Sefer Torah. And the poskim caution against doing that because it could ruin the Sefer Torah. If you imagine it, year after year, every time you read that passage, somebody comes and gives a little rub, so eventually the ink is going to start cracking off. So when you touch your talis or whatever you're holding to get your aliyah, you should touch it very gently to the spot where you're touching it. And that's why some people have the custom that they don't actually touch the talis to the exact spot where you're going to be reading, because they don't want to touch the letters and risk over time having the letters get erased. Rather, they touch the talis to the side of the column, or on the back side of the parchment, over the Eitz Chaim, over the where it's rolled up. Basically, they touch the talis to a blank piece of the parchment where there is no ink, parallel to the place in the Torah where they're going to start reading. Anyway, again, the Chabad custom is that we do touch it on the scroll itself, both at the beginning and the end of the passage that you're about to read for your Aliyah. And then you, but do so gently. Okay. Then you close your eye. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch continues. You hold it open with both hands, close your eyes, and say Baruch Hashem Berech. So this is the common Ashkenaz minhag, that when a person makes the bracha before the Aliyah, the Sefer Torah stays open. Others have the minhag, and there's the Chabad minhag, that we close the Sefer Torah. Now, he says that you have to close your eyes. The reason why he's saying you close your eyes is because because he says you keep the Sefer Torah open. So if the Sefer Torah is open, so we don't want it to give the impression that the bracha that you're saying is written in the Sefer Torah. So therefore, you close your eyes to that one and look away. He says, close your eyes. Close your eyes to demonstrate that the Sefer Torah is open. But I'm saying this bracha, not that this bracha is written in the Sefer Torah. The Chabad custom is that even though we do close the Sefer Torah, and we specifically close the Sefer Torah, if I understand correctly, to emphasize that the bracha is not written in the Torah. In addition to that, we also look to the side, and there's some communities have the custom to look to the left, some have the custom to look to the right. Our custom is to look to sort of tilt your head and face the right. And if you're reading the bracha from the siddur, so then you'll notice in many shuls, as in Beis Menachem, the just a moment. The Sefer Torah is the sheet where we has the brachas printed is right there on the bima to the right, so that sort of all fits in neatly. That the custom is you turn to the right. Okay. Then he says, you say Baruch Hashem and Beirach. You should say this loud enough for the entire congregation to hear. So this is very important. When you have an aliyah, you have to say it loud enough that at least he says the entire congregation. But minimally, it would be necessary to say it loud enough that it should be audible to 10 people, to a minyan standing around the bim. They respond Baruch Hashem and Beirach Leilam Vayit. Now the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that if the congregation did not hear you say Baruch Hu, then even though they heard the reader responding, nevertheless, they do not respond with him. Instead, after the reader has responded, they respond Amen to the reader. So what he's saying over here is that if the person got the aliyah, and he's obviously, it's necessary for him to say it loud enough for 10 people to hear. But what about all the people standing in the back who can't hear him? So they should not respond Baruch Hashem and Beirach. Rather, after those who have heard respond Baruch Hashem and Beirach Leilam, everybody else says Amen. That's the opinion of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. In fact, the Alter Rebbe's opinion is different, and therefore the Chabad practice in accordance with the Alter Rebbe is that as long as a minyan heard him, then everybody else can also respond. So if I'm standing all the way in the back of the shul and I can't hear the person saying Baruch Hu, but as long as I hear everybody else responding, so I know that he's finished and 10 people heard him, then I could also respond Baruch Hashem and Beirach Leilam Vayit. After the congregation has responded Baruch Hashem and Beirach Leilam Vayit, the Eilah also repeats Baruch Hashem and Beirach Leilam Vayit, and then he recites the Bracha Asher Bacha Banu, after which the congregation responds Amen. So then you remove the left hand, because until now he's holding the two what's called the Atzei Chayim, the two sticks on either side. So he's holding in both hands. So now when he finishes the bracha and the Baal Torah is going to start reading, so you let go with your left hand, and now you're holding the Sefer Torah with your right hand only during the reading. Now, then the reader reads, and you read along quietly. Now, this is an interesting thing. There's different opinions in the poskim about this, that the person who's getting the aliyah, does he read along word for word with the Baal Torah? So we paskin, and this is what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is saying, and is also the Chabad practice, that the person who's getting the aliyah to the Torah should read along with the Baal Torah. You'll notice, for example, that if you look at the chart in the back of the siddur, where it has all the different places in davening of hefsek b'tfilah, when if you get called to an aliyah at different parts in davening, are you allowed to go or not? There'll be certain parts where it says you can take that you do, if he calls you, you do go to the aliyah, but you don't read along. So there's some parts in davening where you could get your aliyah and read along. There's some parts, for example, if you got called to an aliyah in the middle of the Amidah, you would not interrupt the Amidah to go to an aliyah. And then there's other parts, like for example, during the blessings of Shema, where you would, if you shouldn't be called, but if he called you because he didn't realize that you're in the middle of the Shema, and then so then you do go to the aliyah, you don't read along. Additionally, there's two points to add. One is that he says here you read along quietly. It's very important that you read very quietly for two reasons. First of all, if other people can hear you, then it's a problem, because we can't have two You can only, halachically, we say you can only hear one voice. So there's the voice of the Bal Koreh. So if people could also hear the voice of the Oila reading, that would be a problem. So that's why it has to be quietly. Additionally, it could also confuse the Bal Koreh if the person getting the Aliyah is humming along too loud. So when you read along with the Bal Koreh, to do so quietly, so that only you, so that even the Bal Koreh who's standing just inches next to you should not be able to hear you. Now, I haven't really looked or found this explicit anywhere, but it would appear to me that this is only if the person who's getting the Aliyah is fluent in Hebrew. If the person who's getting the Aliyah is not fluent in Hebrew, and then it's likely that they're going to make mistakes in the vowelization of the words that they're reading along, then it's better not to read along. Because as it is, there are many opinions, there are opinions that you don't read along with the Bal Koreh. So, and so if you hear the Bal Koreh reading, so then, like anything, just like you hear somebody else saying Kiddush, you discharge your obligation of saying Kiddush. So here you hear the Bal Koreh reading and you discharge your obligation to read it. Whereas if you read along but you make a mistake, so then you've made a mistake and you can't discharge your obligation from listening to the Bal Koreh because you weren't listening to him, you were busy reading yourself. So again, my understanding of the halacha is that if the person who's getting the Aliyah is not fluent in the Hebrew, then it's best that they do not read along. Okay, the reader may not begin to read until the congregation completes saying Amen. The entire congregation will be attentive and listen carefully to the Torah reading. Okay, after the, and it says, Bort and Sefer Minhagim, and many Sfarim, that you should not just be attentive and listen carefully, but you should actually follow along in a Chumash or in a Siddur, whatever it is. And after the completion of the reading, you again hold the Sefer Torah also with your left hand. So during the Aliyah, you were only holding it with your right hand. Now you join back and hold it with your left hand. Roll the Torah closed and recite the last bracha. Now there's no mention here of touching the spot where you ended, and many have the custom that they takadot. When they finish the Aliyah, there's no touching with the talis or anything and kissing, they just close the Torah and make a bracha. However, many have the custom that also at the end of the Aliyah, before they make the final, the after bracha, so to speak, they'll touch the spot where it ended and give it a kiss. And the Chabad custom is that you touch the end and the beginning. So before, according to Chabad custom, before your Aliyah, you touch the beginning and then the end. And at the end of the Aliyah, you touch the end and then the beginning. Okay, and then for the after bracha, everybody agrees that you make the after bracha while the Torah is closed and you recite the last bracha. Okay, it is forbidden to hold the Sefer Torah with bare hands. Now, here it's talking about when if you were holding the actual scroll, the actual parchment. It's forbidden to hold the parchment of the Sefer Torah with bare hands. Rather, you should hold it by means of talis or hold it by its poles. So either if you're going to make the bracha holding the Sefer Torah on the actual parchment, then you should have some sort of makeshift gloves, so you wrap your hands in the talis in order to say the bracha, or you hold it by the poles. Now, there are some who refrain from touching even the poles with bare hands and only with the talis. And indeed, in Sefer Minhagim, it's brought down that this is what we should do. That in the Friedrich Rebbe did this, that and the previous Rebbe did this, and this is how it's recorded in Sefer Minhagim, that even when you're only holding the poles of the Sefer Torah, you should only do so with a talis. However, in practice, even in Chabad, it's not commonly done that way. And the reason is, presumably, because the Rebbe himself did not do it that way, with the exception of Simchas Torah. In Simchas Torah, the Rebbe got an Aliyah, the Rebbe did hold the poles of the Sefer Torah with a talis, but the rest of the year, whenever the Rebbe got the Aliyah, he held the Sefer Torah with his bare hands, and presumably that's why most, even within Chabad, do it that way as well. Okay. The Eila as well as the reader are required to stand. It is even forbidden to lean on something, for we must stand in awe, just in awe. Just a second. For just as the Torah was given in awe, so too must we conduct ourselves concerning it in awe. However, a weak person may lean a little for support. So what he's saying over here is that a normal, healthy person has to stand for the aliyah. This is not, by the way, this applies both to the person receiving the aliyah and also to the Baal Korif, the person reading from the Torah. Both of them have to stand upright for the duration of the aliyah. If the person is weak and he's not able to stand without leaning, so then we are lenient and we allow him to lean a little for support. And the way I understand that, if I'm not mistaken, what that means is you could lean a little bit so that you're getting extra support from the bima, but not that you're completely leaning your entire, that your support is completely from the bima, if I'm not mistaken. Now then the question becomes, what about somebody who is, let's say, wheelchair bound? Is it permissible to give an aliyah to somebody who is wheelchair bound? So the simple reading of the halacha would be that no, it's forbidden. You have to stand, and if you can't stand, then we could allow you to lean for a little support. But if you can't stand even with support, and you're bound to you're only able to sit, so then you would not be able to get an aliyah. That's certainly and similarly, you would not be able to be a Baal Korif. That's certainly the normative halacha, and many poskim, including, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Yosef, have a lengthy tshuva, where they say explicitly that if somebody is not able to stand up at all, that they should not read from the Torah or get an aliyah. However, I didn't sort of review this in depth. I just looked around very quickly earlier today. I did see that there are some who try to give some wiggle room. That if the person is not able to stand, then it would be very important for them to get an aliyah. Let's say they have a yard site or something like that. That we should be allowed to give them an aliyah from a wheelchair. Obviously, it would have to be at a level where they could see the Sefer Torah. So you would have to put the Sefer Torah on a lower table. But even so, again, I didn't review this in great length. So if it's relevant in practice, we'd have to review this in greater detail. But certainly, the normative halacha, the straightforward halacha, would seem to suggest that one may not give an aliyah to somebody who's in a wheelchair. Okay. Okay. 6. While the Oila recites Baruch Hu, the congregation says Baruch Hashem and Baruch Hu, the entire congregation should stand. Now here, so many people don't do this. I'm not sure why. Maybe there is some justification not to, but certainly the straightforward halacha is that one should stand for Baruch Hu. But then while he recites the rest of the bracha, Asher Baruch Banu, as well as during the reading, and also during the last bracha, then one is not obliged to stand. But those who are scrupulous in the observance of mitzvahs demand more of themselves than stand, and this is appropriate. And indeed, the custom of the Rebbe was that one should stand for that the Rebbe did stand for the duration of the reading of the Torah. If I'm not mistaken, in the later years, meaning after the Rebbe had a heart attack in 1977, so later, after that, the Rebbe would sit for the Kriyas HaTorah of Shabbos, where it was longer, but the Kriyas HaTorah of Monday and Thursday, he always remained standing. So yeah, the Rebbe did stand for Kriyas HaTorah. It says here that's Bedaktikin, those who are scrupulous in their mitzvah observance, do so. I once saw somewhere a discussion about that there's two types of bima. You have the regular bima, like we have in Beis Menachem, where it's just the box where you put on the Sefer Torah, and then in some shuls you have a more if you will, fancy or more elaborate bima where there's sort of a fence around it. They have that in Yeshurun, they have that, I think, in Bnei Ruvain, and in many other shuls. So it could be that if there's a fence around it, so then there's more room to be lenient, not to stand for the reading for the Baruch Hu, even perhaps, or for the reading of the Torah, because the Sefer Torah is halachically considered to be in a different domain. Anyway. But then he says, but between readings, there's no need whatsoever to be stringent. Between readings, certainly one may sit down. If the reader himself is called up to the as an Oila, so that means the Baal Koreh is now getting an aliyah. So then another person should stand at his side. So that, in other words, usually if a person gets an aliyah, so there's the Oila and the Baal Koreh, so you have two people. So here he's saying that even if the Oila that if the Balkari himself is getting an Aliyah, then there should be another person to stand there. Why? Because just as the Torah was given through an intermediary that is Moshe Rabbeinu, so too should we conduct ourselves to hear the reading with an intermediary. Now, the truth is that nowadays, the widespread custom is that for the duration of the entire reading of the Torah, we have an extra two people on the side. You have the Gabbai standing on the right side and another Gabbai or someone else standing on the left side. And then, so therefore, in such a case, even when there is an Eilah, even if Balkar himself is getting an Aliyah, you wouldn't need another person because you already have two people on either side. Sometimes you've seen the Balkara, there should have a person standing literally right next to them for the Aliyah. I have seen people do that, and I do it myself if it's convenient to do so, but I have not sort of researched the topic at length to see exactly the different opinions and what is necessary and what is extra, etc. Okay. Once the reader has begun to read, the entire congregation is forbidden to indulge in conversation, even about Torah subjects. So during the reading of the Torah, one has to be completely silent and attentive, and not in talk, even about Torah concepts. Conversation is forbidden even between readings. This is a law which is often neglected, and if I recall correctly, it's spoken a number of places where the Rebbe, and it could be this letter of the Rebbe Ashab, about the importance of this, that we don't talk during the reading of the Torah, even in between aliyahs. From the beginning of the reading of the Torah till the end, one should refrain from talking, even in between aliyahs. Now, there are those who are lenient about the time between aliyahs if there's stuff going on. In other words, if you're just going from one aliyah to the next and it takes a minute to call the next person and him to come to his place, then there's no, then one has to remain attentive. If there's a whole Mishaberach and there's a lot going on and you want to use that time to learn Torah or to discuss an important matter with somebody, then perhaps there is more room to be lenient. It is forbidden to leave the synagogue while the Torah is being read, but between the different aliyahs, when the Sefer Torah is rolled up, one may leave if the need is great. Okay, we'll pause here and we'll continue next Tuesday. It's a kind of a new topic over here about calling a Kohen, then a Levi, and then a Yisrael, and all the different scenarios, what to do if that's not possible. So we'll pick up from Sif Test next week. Okay. Good night, everyone. Any questions before we sign off? Okay, good night.